number of conditions. We don't want to get into that bind. We have a last condition whose conditions are not fulfilled, which is a zero, which leads to a bunch of other zeros. We don't like that. But really, there were an infinite number of those conditions. Now you got to think about that just as St. Thomas Aquinas did for just a moment. So, okay, so let's hypothesize not F. We're going to now say that there's only a world of conditioned realities. And now the conditioned reality, a series of conditioned realities, has an infinite number in it. So there's no last or terminating condition. Think about that for 1 second. There's no last or terminating condition, and all we've got are conditioned realities. Think about that for a second. What you're telling me is the cat is dependent upon an infinite number of conditions being fulfilled. You said so. You said that there was no last or terminating condition. Okay. So now the cat is dependent upon an infinite. That is to say, it is dependent upon an unending, unterminating number of conditions being fulfilled. Think about that. If the cat is dependent upon an unterminating or infinite number of conditions being fulfilled, since infinity is always more than can ever be achieved, then the cat is dependent upon an unachievable number of conditions being fulfilled. The minute you say you can achieve that number, the minute you say, oh no, I want to have an achievable number of conditions that the cat is dependent upon, you're back to a hypothesis F, in which case you have a last condition whose conditions are not fulfilled. If you come over to the other side, you still have to say that the cat is dependent upon a non-terminating number. Non-terminating number is more than can ever be achieved. If it's more than can ever be achieved, it's unachievable by definition. If it's an unachievable number of conditions, and you don't want to make it achievable because then you make it finite, and then you put a terminating condition in it, if you want to stick with an unachievable number of conditions, then listen to this statement. The cat is dependent upon an unachievable number of conditions being fulfilled. It won't ever be achieved. And therefore, since it can never be achieved, since it's always more than can ever be achieved, because there is no terminus, there's no beginning point to the conditions from which the cat is going to arise, it'll always be zero, just like St. Thomas Aquinas' infinite series of causes. He'll always be a zero. And so, of course, you now just said the cat is dependent upon an unachievable number of conditions being fulfilled. The cat is dependent upon a non-terminating number of conditions which will never be fulfilled, in which case there's no kitty cat. Ooh, now let's just take a look at that. Both sides now. Because hypothesis not F will always be absurd. Hypothesis that there are an infinite number of conditions for every condition existing will always be absurd. Because an infinite number of conditions, by definition, in order to keep it distinct from finitude, in order to keep it distinct from a finite number of conditions, an infinity always has to be more than it can ever be achieved. Otherwise, if you say it's achievable, it's finite by definition. You can't get out of this bind. You can't even get out of the bind with a circle. But the key thing to remember is you're stuck both ways. Hypothesis not F is an absurdity because, of course, it means an unachievable number of conditions that the cat is dependent upon, in which case it will never be achieved, in which case the cat is zero. But if you turn around and say, but no, it wasn't, the cat wasn't dependent upon an infinite number, it wasn't dependent upon an unachievable, it was dependent upon an achievable number of conditions. Fine. And that achievable number of conditions will have to terminate at a final condition. And that final condition will have to be a conditioned reality, because that's part of hypothesis, not you are. That is to say, a hypothesis is there's not an unconditioned reality in all reality. And if that is the case, then you can turn right around and you can know this for certain. You can know that that last condition will be a conditioned existence whose conditions are not fulfilled. And if it is a conditioned existence whose conditions are not fulfilled, then it is zero. And everything dependent on it is zero. Now do you see that both hypothesis F and hypothesis not F are both false? If they're both false, then hypothesis not you are has to be false. In which case you can never postulate that it can only be conditioned realities in all reality. In which case it must be true that there must be at least one unconditioned reality in all reality. And that, as we shall see, we will know to be God. Thank you, and we will work on the other parts of this in our next unit.